For 2 years, Renata Voss had perfected the art of disappearing inside a crowd. Not the way a shy person disappears, folding inward and hoping nobody notices. The way a trained person disappears, deliberate, practiced, so thorough that the invisibility becomes its own kind of armor. She wore blue scrubs to work. She kept her dark hair pulled back tight. She never raised her voice above what the moment required, and she never let her eyes do what her eyes always wanted to do, which was to sweep a room in under 4 seconds and map every exit. Tonight at the Hargrove County Hospital gala, she was carrying a tray of champagne flutes and trying very hard not to map the exits. She counted 3 anyway, old habits. The ballroom of the Haverford Inn had been dressed up for the occasion. White linen on every table, flowers Renata couldn't name. Men in dark jackets standing in clusters talking about sacrifice the way people talk about sacrifice when it has never cost them a single morning of sleep. The hospital's annual fundraiser for veteran care. 300 guests at $200 a plate, all here to feel good about a war most of them had watched on television. At the podium near the far wall stood Dr. Harlan Steed. He was the kind of man who filled a room by assuming the room was already his. Chief of Administration at Hargrove County, the architect of every press release the hospital had issued in the past 4 years, the face on every brochure. Tall, silver-haired, jaw like a news anchor, voice built for echo. He had never served a day of military service, but he could speak about veterans with the warmth of a man who had personally carried each of them off the field. Sacrifice, Steed was saying, comes in many forms. He had been saying versions of this for 11 minutes. Renata had counted. It comes in the form of the young soldier who gives his leg on a hillside overseas. And it comes equally in the form of the people right here in this room. The nurses, the orderlies, the quiet, unseen caregivers, who show up every single day to do the small, humble work these heroes deserve. He paused for effect, then he pointed at Renata. Like this young woman right here. 300 faces swung toward her like one animal turning its head. Renata went still. Not from embarrassment. From the specific controlled still as someone who has learned that stillness is the first tool you reach for when everything inside you wants to move. Do you see her? Steed said, warm and certain. She will never know what these men went through. None of us can. But she shows up, she carries the trays. There is real beauty in that kind of quiet service, a beauty these men deserve to be surrounded by. Applause. Someone near the front actually said, bless her heart. Renata looked at the tray in her hands. She set her jaw, made herself smaller the way she had been making herself smaller for 2 years, and walked back toward the service corridor without looking at anyone. The kitchen was loud and warm. Carmen, the other float nurse drafted for the catering shift, touched her arm. You okay? That man just used you like a prop. I'm fine, Renata said. You don't look fine. You look like you're deciding something. I'm deciding where to put this tray. Carmen studied her a moment longer, the way people who've worked alongside someone long enough sometimes do, looking for the thing underneath the answer. In 2 years on the ward together, she had decided Renata Voss was the quietest person she'd ever met, and that the quiet was not the same as empty. She had seen the way Renata's hands moved during a code, never fumbled, never hesitated, never asked anyone else what to do first. One day, Carmen said, you are going to surprise somebody. Doubt it, Renata said, and took a fresh tray back through the doors. The long-term ward sat at the far end of the building, 3 corridors and a fire door away from the gala. The noise dropped off completely the moment she stepped through. This was the real work. Not the ballroom, not the speeches. Here, in the low light, men who had once been young lay in narrow beds with their machines and their memories, and the particular silence of people who have already made their peace with most things. Room 11 was awake. Couldn't sleep, said the man in the bed. Earl Grady, 79, 2 tours in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne, his body now staging a slow mutiny against the life it had been asked to lead. His kidneys were giving out. 3 weeks at most, and he knew it the way you know weather when you've spent a long time reading the sky. You never sleep before 11, Renata said. I sleep fine, I just do it between midnight and 4. He watched her check his IV line. They using you for a show pony out there? Something like that. That Steed fellow. Earl's voice carried the flatness of a man filtering contempt through decades of discipline. I can hear him through the wall. Sounds like a man who learned what to say about a thing without ever learning what it is. He means well. Most dangerous kind of person, Earl said. The ones who mean well and don't know a damn thing. Renata adjusted his blanket. Her hands were steady and practiced, and told nothing about where they'd learned to be that way. You walk different than other nurses, Earl said. She didn't answer. Been watching people my whole life. Some of it professional. He'd been an intelligence asset out of Saigon for the last 8 months of his second tour, though he rarely said so. You don't walk like someone who learned their craft in a hospital. You walk like someone who learned to move without making sound. He watched her face for a reaction. That's not a thing they teach in nursing school. Get some rest, Earl. In a minute, his hand found her wrist, papery and strong, the way old hands get when the rest of the body is failing, but the grip still remembers what it was trained to do. There's something coming tonight. I don't know what, but I've felt this air before. The way it goes quiet right before it gets loud. You trust that in my experience. Renata went still. I'll check on you in an hour, she said. Don't have to check on me, Earl said. I'm the one you don't need to worry about. Whatever's coming, you're the one it's coming for. He let go of her wrist. Just thought you should know that I know. She stood in the doorway a moment longer than she needed to. Good night, Earl. Night, soldier, he said and closed his eyes. She stopped walking. He had never used that word. She did not correct him. The ambulance bay doors hit the wall at 9:47. Not the controlled swing of a scheduled transfer. A crash. The sound of someone coming through a door without caring what was on the other side. Renata heard it from the nurse's station, and her head came up before she understood why, the way a head comes up when a sound lands in the frequency of incoming trouble. A voice she didn't recognize, clipped and certain. I need a trauma nurse, I need her now, patient is GCS 13 and dropping. And then another voice lower from the gurney itself, fighting through what it cost to form words. Voss. Where is Voss? I need Renata Voss. Her blood went cold. Nobody in this building knew that name to say it that way. Not like a greeting, like a destination. She set the chart down with both hands, carefully. The way you set something down when your body has already made a decision your mind hasn't caught up to. She walked toward the bay doors, not running, and came around the corner to see the gurney and the two paramedics and the man on it. He was big, combat built. His right side was soaked through, the dark stain spreading and pulsing at his lower abdomen in the specific way that told anyone who knew how to read it. There was arterial involvement and a very limited timeline. His left arm was braced against the gurney rail, elbow locked, two fingers jammed hard into a wound she couldn't see yet. Improvised pressure, maintained on himself in the back of a moving ambulance. Civilians don't do that, they don't know how. They don't have the composure. His eyes found her across 30 feet of corridor and did not let go. Voss, he said, in the calm of a man who has accepted the parameters of a bad situation and is working inside them. Thank God. I don't have a trauma team, the lead paramedic said, voice cracking. No surgeon on. The on-call went to the gala and doesn't answer. I know this is a long-term care facility, but we're 22 minutes from county and he doesn't have 22 minutes. Renata was already at the gurney. Gray undertone in the skin, lips pale at the corners, pulse visible at the neck without touching, compensating, which meant the body was still fighting. Wound in the right lower quadrant, deep, pulsing, his hand the only thing keeping him from bleeding out where he lay. Breathing even, no tracheal deviation, no JVD, no chest involvement, one problem, one very serious problem. Somewhere between 35 and 40. A jaw she didn't recognize, a nose broken twice, and a pair of eyes focused on her with an intensity that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with purpose. I don't know you, she said. No, he agreed, but your commanding officer did. Something moved across his face. Colonel Yates, he asked me to find you before. A wet cough took the next 3 words. When it passed, his eyes came back to hers, a fraction dimmer. Before he couldn't anymore. The corridor tilted. Colonel Andrew Yates. The man who had recruited her out of Fort Campbell 12 years ago. Who had sat across a folding table in a windowless room and told her she had a gift for reading danger before it arrived, and that there were people in the world who needed someone with that gift. Who had written her a letter when she resigned and told her she didn't owe anybody an explanation for choosing to live. He had sent this man to find her, which meant he had known she would need to be found, which meant he was gone. She did not let herself finish that thought. There would be time, not now. From the ballroom end of the corridor, the gala crowd had begun to drift toward the commotion the way crowds always do, drawn by the gravity of someone else's crisis. At the front of that drift, microphone still loosely in hand, came Dr. Harlan Steed. People, give them room, he announced, projecting into the corridor with the authority of a man who had never doubted his own authority. Let's not impede the medical professionals. They're trained for this. He lowered his voice, leaned toward Carmen. Get someone on the phone to county. This is clearly beyond the facility's scope. Carmen looked at Renata. Renata looked at the man on the gurney. She thought, if I step forward, the 2 years are over. All of it, every wall, in front of everyone. She looked at his hand, locked against his own body, keeping himself alive by will and training, and the refusal to let go of the one thing left in his control. She thought, he drove here specifically, to me. Andrew Yates sent him because Andrew Yates believed I could finish something. She had spent 2 years making herself small enough to be safe. She had been wrong about what safe meant. "Everybody move back," Renata said. Her voice came out different, not louder, lower, the voice of someone who has given instructions under conditions where not following them meant dying. The hallway went quiet. Steed blinked. "Now I understand the impulse, but a nurse is not." "Back," she said again, not looking at him, and he stepped back. She turned to the paramedics, 2 fingers extended. "You, largest bore you have, right antecubital, open the line all the way. You, direct pressure supplies, 30 seconds. Trauma pack if this unit carries one. Carmen, clear this corridor of everyone without a medical credential. Nobody with a phone stays in the hallway. Go now." Nobody moved for half a second. "Now," Renata said, and the hallway came apart and did exactly what she told it. She dropped to one knee beside the gurney and put her hands on his, talking him through the transition. Her fingers replacing his, finding the anatomy, pressing the femoral artery flat against the pelvic rim, with the 3-finger grip she'd learned in a forward operating base, outside a city she wasn't allowed to name. The bleeding slowed. He exhaled through his teeth. Good pain, the kind that meant blood was staying where it belonged. "You have a name," she said, not a question. "Solis," he said. "Staff Sergeant Victor Solis, retired, call sign Hammerhead." A faint exhale that might have been a laugh in a different situation, on account of I once headbutted a door off its hinges in Kandahar. Long story. "I'll want to hear it," Renata said, "which means you're staying awake." "Yes, ma'am." "Yates," she said, keeping her voice level. "When?" 6 weeks ago, cancer fast." He paused, conserving, stayed sharp until the last 2 days. "Made me promise 3 things, find you, give you the drive, tell you what he never said out loud." "What drive?" "Inside jacket lining, left sewn in." Renata didn't take her hands from the wound. "Carmen." Carmen was already there, white-lipped and steady. "I heard, I've got it. The rip of fabric, a pause, it's here, small drive waterproof sleeve. Keep it on you, don't let it leave your hand." She looked back at Solis. What didn't he say out loud? Solis's eyes were dimming at the edges the way eyes dim when the body redistributes its remaining resources toward the things that matter most. He pulled them back to her with visible effort. "The mission that burned your unit," he said. "Kunar Province, 2019. She went very still. "They told you it was bad intelligence," Solis said. "It wasn't. The route was sold. Private contractor, Meridian Group. They traded your team's exfil window for a wire transfer. 5 men died because somebody needed to clear a debt." His jaw tightened. Yates spent 4 years building the case. "It's all on that drive. Account transfers, intercepts, everything. The man who brokered it, Garrett Fenn, found out the case existed and has been trying to get ahead of it ever since." The name landed like a stone into still water, Garrett Fenn. She had heard it once, 3 years ago, in a debrief room at Langley, where a man with no rank insignia told her the Kunar ambush was the result of a compromised informant network, that the inquiry was ongoing, that she should go home and let the process work. She had known, sitting in that room, that something was wrong with the explanation, the way she always knew things, in the body, before the mind caught up. She had gone home anyway. 5 of her people were dead. She didn't know who to trust, and the weight of it had pressed her down until there was only one thing left to do, which was disappear. It was never your fault. Solis was fading, his pressure dropping. She could feel it in the pulse beneath her fingers, the change in resistance. "Carmen, helicopter now. Tell them junctional hemorrhage, controlled in the field, patients 140 over 80 and falling. He needs vascular on the pad when they land. Tell them we need Hargrove County to hold the oar." She looked at the paramedic. "I'm going to walk you through this handoff. Your hands replace mine exactly. Don't second guess, don't shift, don't look away from where I put you." "I've never done a junctional." "You're not doing it," Renata said. "You're holding a position I'm setting for you. There's a difference. Pay attention." She walked him through it. His hands shook for 3 seconds and then steadied, because her voice left no room for the shaking to continue. Solis found her arm as she stepped back. "What he said, Yates, the last clear thing. His grip was loose but real. He said you were the best he ever ran. Said you carried the weight of a thing that wasn't yours to carry and never once complained. Said he was sorry he didn't say that while you were still in the work. A breath. Said he was proud of you every day, even when you stopped picking up the phone." Renata's jaw locked. Her eyes stayed dry by the force of something forged over a very long time, something that didn't break easily, though it could be bent. "You found me," she said. "You can stop now." He let go. At the corridor's far end, the automatic doors opened again. 3 people came through, 2 men and a woman, plain clothes, no visible badges, moving in the spread-out, corner-checking pattern of people trained to walk into rooms that might be hostile. The man in front had a gray beard, a scar through one eyebrow, and the economy of motion of someone who'd spent a long time learning not to waste any. He locked onto Renata from 50 feet out and stopped walking. Voss, he said. Sharp, she said. Devon Sharp. Former Army intelligence, 12 years in the same work she'd done, retired now and running something with no name on any official chart. She had worked beside him in 3 countries, had once kept him from bleeding out in a river, hadn't seen him in 2 years. How'd you find me, she said. Not a question, she already knew. Followed Solis, Sharp said, crossing the distance in even strides. He came to you first, what Yates told him to do. His eyes went to Carmen's closed fist where the drive was. Fenn's people tracked Solis from the highway. 2 vehicles, hit him on the on-ramp, 2 rounds in the side, and he kept driving. 30 miles. To here. How many? 8 leaving the vehicles in the parking structure. Former operators, Renata. Good at this. They don't leave loose ends. His eyes moved to the gala crowd still banked along the corridor walls, phones half raised, evening gowns catching the fluorescent light. 300 civilians in a building with no exits except the ones she'd already mapped. Fenn, she said. Not in the assault, he never is. Sends his people in and stays back for the cleanup. She understood the shape of it before he finished. The assault team wasn't here for the crowd. They were here for the drive and for everyone who'd touched it. Fenn would let his people move through the building, then come in behind them for the one thing that mattered. I need these civilians out, Renata said. South exit parking structure, away from the building, no running. The second someone runs, you get a panic and people get hurt in the doors. She turned Carmen. Carmen straightened, her chin doing something that might have been trembling before it stopped. 300 people, South Hall. You walk in front, move with purpose. Anyone asks, it's a fire safety drill, and the quickest way to help the patients is to clear the corridors. Take Dr. Steed with you. Give him a job. Put him at the south door, have him count people through. He'll do it. Men like that need to be useful. What about the ward? Carmen's voice cracked. Earl. Mr. Delaney in room 8. They can't walk, Renata, they can't. The ward stays with me, Renata said. Nobody gets to those men. She held Carmen's eyes until Carmen nodded. Steed had drifted close enough to hear. A man who'd spent his career at the center of every situation, and the situation had moved its center without asking his permission, and he was trying to find his footing. Now wait just a moment, he said. I am the administrative director of this facility. If there's a security situation, the correct course of action is to contact law enforcement and allow them. Law enforcement is 20 minutes out, Renata said. We don't have 20 minutes, Dr. Steed. Listen to me carefully. She turned and looked at him fully for the first time all evening, not head down, shoulders folded, making herself small enough to be invisible, but straight on, green eyes flat and old, doing the fast cold math of someone calculating who lives. He stopped talking. There are armed men in this building, she said. Former military. Exceptionally good at what they're doing, and they didn't come here to negotiate. The only thing standing between 300 people and those men is what we do in the next 90 seconds. Carmen is going to lead your guests to safety. You are going to help her. South Hall, parking structure. Count every person through the door, and don't leave until you've counted all 300. Steed's mouth opened, nothing came out. The young woman who carries the water trays, Renata said, is giving you instructions that will save the lives of everyone in this building. I'd strongly suggest you follow them. She was already turning before she saw his face change. She and Sharp's 2 people, Birch and Lena, both strangers to her who moved like people she understood, cleared the floor plan in 4 minutes. Renata talked it through fast. 2 entry points. The loading dock on the east side, that's where they'll push first, most direct route to the ward, and the service stairwell off the north corridor, because it comes up behind the nursing station and cuts the building in half. Standard split, 4 and 4. Sharp nodded. Agreed. You and Birch take the loading dock. True choke point, single door, they funnel through 2 at a time. Patient men in a doorway can hold that all night. Lena, east corridor with me. The stairwell's the problem. She looked at the woman. Lena was compact and very still in a way Renata recognized. You've done this before. Fallujah and twice in Mali, Lena said. Good enough, Renata said. She pushed the gurney with Solis into the far end of Ward C and parked it between 2 steel supply lockers, out of every sight line from the door. Earl was awake. She had known he would be. Told you, he said. Felt it all evening. You did tell me. She pressed the drive into his hands, his fingers closed around it with a grip that surprised her. Earl, last job. Soldier to soldier, you hold this. Whatever you hear through that wall, you don't let it go. Can you do that? Earl looked down at the small thing in his hands, then up at her. I held a perimeter in the Ia Drang Valley with 4 men and 1 functioning radio, he said. I think I can manage a parking lot data drive. He tucked it under his blanket. Go do the thing you came back here to do. She almost said something. The clock wouldn't let her. Nobody comes through that door tonight, she told the ward. Every old man in every bed, men who had been young in jungles and deserts and mountains with no names on any public map. I've got the watch. She turned to face the dark end of the corridor and went to work. A hospital is not a helpless place for someone who knows how to read a room as a field. She moved fast and quiet, placing things along the north corridor with the same deliberateness her father had taught her in the woods of eastern Tennessee when she was 11. Prepare the ground, Renata. A fight half prepared is half won before the first move. Fire extinguisher off the bracket. Crash cart wheeled to the hall junction. 3 oxygen cylinders positioned in alcoves at calculated intervals. A defibrillator charged and ready. A tray of instruments she would not name to herself but knew how to use. Lena watched without speaking. The stairwell door opened 11 minutes later. 4 of them. Night vision optics, weapons up, moving in the quiet, coordinated spread of people trained for exactly this kind of low-light environment. Professional, careful, patient. They had never worked this building before. She had been in it every day for 2 years. The first oxygen cylinder came around at shoulder height from the alcove, controlled and precise, and the lead man dropped like a felled tree and didn't rise. His rifle slid away into the dark. The fire extinguisher bloomed a wall of white fog down the corridor before the second man could reorient. Night vision in dense fog isn't an advantage. It's a white curtain 16 inches from your face, and the 2 seconds it takes to process that are 2 seconds you don't have. Lena took the second man from the left fast clean. The third and fourth were better. They'd pulled the optics, gone to naked eye, smart but too slow. Renata came through the fog like something the fog had made. Inside the third man's reach before his rifle came around. And what happened in the next 4 seconds was the result of 10,000 repetitions her body still remembered perfectly, regardless of what her mind had spent 2 years trying to forget. 3 of them down. None of them dead. She'd held that line carefully. There's a distance between down and gone, and crossing it unnecessarily is its own kind of failure. The fourth man was smart enough to give ground toward the ward door, toward Earl, toward the drive. She was faster. He went to the floor with his arm locked behind him, at an angle that made very clear the angle would not improve if he moved. Don't, Renata said quietly, and he didn't. She keyed the radio Sharp had given her. North corridor clear, 4 down, restrained status. Sharp, loading dock holding, 3 down on our side, but Voss fends not with the assault, he's not here. The cold came back, she already knew where he was. He came for the drive, she said, moving before she'd finished saying it, running back through the white fog toward Ward C. The ward door was ajar. She went through low and fast, and there was Garrett Fenn. He'd come through the drop ceiling, the old maintenance crawl space above the ward she hadn't sealed, because it wasn't on any public floor plan, and only someone who had done very thorough preparation would have known it was there. He stood at the foot of Earl's bed in the dim red of the emergency backup lights, a calm and patient man with a pistol loose in his right hand and his left palm open, as though the conversation he was having was perfectly reasonable. The drive, Fenn was saying to Earl, in the quiet voice of a man who believes firmly in efficiency. You hand it up and I'm gone. Nobody in this room is involved anymore. That's all this is. Earl Grady looked at the man above him, 79 years old, lungs in slow failure, body in the final negotiations of a very long life. He held the drive to his chest beneath the blanket and did not move. I've had a gun pointed at me by people a good deal scarier than you, Earl said. Men who actually wanted to use it. You don't want to use yours. That makes you approximately the least threatening thing I've seen this week, and I share a floor with a man whose wife keeps sending him fruitcake. Fenn's jaw tightened. Fenn. He turned toward the sound of his name. Renata stood in the doorway. Fog from the corridor curled around her ankles. Her hands hung at her sides, empty, visible, deliberate. Blood dried on her knuckles from the stairwell. Her hair had come most of the way out of its tie, and she looked nothing at all like the woman who had carried a tray of champagne glasses through the ballroom 3 hours ago. She looked like what she was. Fenn went still. Voss, he said. Something moved across his face, unfamiliar there, uncertainty. I heard you walked, heard you were out of the work. I was, she said. Then stand aside, I take the drive, this is over. Nobody else in this room needs to be part of it. Andrew Yates spent 4 years building what's on that drive, Renata said, taking one slow step into the room. 5 of my people died on a road in Kunar province because you needed to clear a line of credit. I carried that for 2 years. I believed it was something I'd done wrong. Fenn's gun hand shifted very slightly, but she saw it, the way she saw everything. It was a business decision, he said. That's all it ever was, the world is full of. Don't, she said, don't explain it to me, I know exactly what it was. She took another step, her voice very even. Put the weapon down, Garrett. He swung the pistol toward Earl. She crossed the room. Inside the arc of his arm she came, exactly the way she'd been trained, exactly the way she'd practiced it until the body owned it without the mind's permission. The wrist turned. The single shot punched up into the ceiling and rained plaster dust across the beds and the men in them, who had heard this sound before in other lifetimes and did not flinch. Fenn's weight, the bed frame, the cold geometry of leverage, everything turned against him in one motion. Then he was face down on the linoleum of a veterans' ward in a forgotten county hospital, and Renata was kneeling on his back, her voice quiet and even and entirely without heat. "You are going to live through tonight," she said. "You are going to stand in a federal courtroom under lights that leave no shadows, and every name, every account, every transaction on that drive is going to be read out loud in front of people whose job it is to write things down. That's not mercy." She drew his hands behind him and bound them with the cord from the window blinds, the knot of someone who had done it many times. That is considerably worse than mercy, and Andrew Yates thought of it before he died, and I think he would have found it very satisfying. The ward doors opened. Sharp came through first, then Birch and Lena, and behind them the first wash of blue and red light spilled through the windows as 3 county sheriff cruisers pulled into the lot. 22 minutes. She had known it would be close to that. Earl held the drive up in one unsteady hand. "I believe this belongs to the United States government," he announced, with the full composure of a man who had just held a perimeter for the last time and done it well. "Not a scratch on it. You can put that in any report you like." Renata crossed to his bed and took the drive, then his hand. His fingers were cold and thin and held on with a grip that was all will and very little body. "Outstanding work," she said softly. "Told you something was coming." His eyes were bright in the dim light. "Always trust the air." He squeezed her hand once. "Don't you go back to being small now. That was never what you were. Promise an old man." "I promise," she said, and meant it in the way you mean something when you have spent a long time not meaning anything. By the time the sun came up, Victor Solis was in surgery at County and expected to keep everything he'd arrived with. Garrett Fenn and the 7 members of his team were in federal custody. The drive had passed into the hands of people who would spend the next 2 years making it count. Renata found Steed in the lobby as the last cruiser pulled away. He stood alone in the emptied space, his jacket off, his hair for the first time not quite where it belonged. He had counted all 300 guests through the south door. She'd heard that from Carmen. He had stood there and done exactly the job she gave him, and hadn't left until the last person was through. "I owe you an apology," he said when he saw her. The words came without architecture, without the usual scaffolding of his voice. "I had no idea. I stood up there and used you like I didn't know what you were." "No," Renata said, "you didn't. All those speeches." He looked at his hands. "I've built my whole professional life around a language I apparently don't actually speak." She looked at him for a moment. She could end him with 4 words in front of the 3 people still left in the lobby. She chose differently. "Then learn the real one," she said, not unkindly. "It's not too late to find out what things actually cost. That's worth more than any speech you could ever give." She held his gaze. "Start with the men in Ward C. Go sit with them tomorrow morning and don't say anything, just listen. You might be surprised what you learn." She left him standing in the light. Sharp was waiting by the doors. "Come back," he said, the offer already in his eyes before he said it. "We need people like you, Renata. The real you, not a ghost. Yates's work needs finishing. Fenn had partners. You know this isn't over." She looked down the long corridor toward Ward C. Morning light was coming gold through the windows at the end of it. The specific gold of early summer, the kind that makes even a hospital corridor look, briefly, like somewhere worth being. She thought about the men in those rooms, the ones who came back from places no speech would ever reach. The ones lying in narrow beds with things in them that had no name in the language their families spoke. The ones who needed someone who could walk in and say, without performing it, without selling it, "I know what it cost. I've been in the same place. You don't have to explain it." "No," she said. Sharp blinked. "I spent 2 years making myself invisible because I thought that was the only safe thing left, and 12 years before that being a weapon because I thought that was the only useful thing I was." She shook her head. "I had it wrong both times." "Then what?" Sharp said. "What does Renata Voss do now?" She looked toward the ward, and something in her face that had been closed for a very long time opened. Not all at once, but enough. "This hospital is full of men who came home from the same places they sent us," she said, "and nobody here knows how to reach them. Nobody speaks the language. Nobody knows what a man's eyes look like 3 years after something he can't say out loud." She held up her hands, the ones that had pulled Solis back from the edge, that had held the line in a dark corridor, that had spent 2 years carrying trays and were now still and sure and ready. "I do," she said, "so I'm staying, and I'm going to build something real. 6 months later, the new Trauma and Transition Wing at Hargrove County Hospital opened under a name that had required some arguing to get approved. The administration had wanted a donor's name, a senator's name, something with fundraising potential and good font choices. Renata told them no. They named it the Grady Center. Earl had not lived to see it, but he had lived long enough that she was able to tell him it was coming. He looked at her from his bed with his bright, tired eyes and said, "That's a damn fool waste of a perfectly good name," and then smiled the way a man smiles when someone does something that surprises him in exactly the right direction. On the morning the wing opened, a 26-year-old veteran came through the front doors shaking so badly he had to hold the door frame. No visible injury, nothing that would show on a scan. He stood at the intake desk and could not make his mouth form any of the words for what was wrong, because there weren't any. Not in the language the intake forms used. A nurse with a long braid and clear green eyes, and a stillness she had learned on purpose, sat down in the chair beside him. She didn't look at the floor. There was no curve left in her shoulders. She looked at him straight, the way you look at someone when you are telling the truth. "I know," she said. "I've been there too, you don't have to explain it." He looked at her. Something in his face shifted. The shift of a person who has been alone inside something for a very long time and has just understood the door was never actually locked. "Now," she said, "let's figure out how to get you home."